Okay, so I filled my journal here, some various gel prints. I should share with you, these stencils are from my new line of stencils being sold through joggles.com. And if you look under FMD Designs, you'll find a majority of these there. I have a mid-century modern type of line as well as a botanical line, so I tend to mix them up here and there. I like using a lot of texture in the background of some things. This print here is a combination of tentacle, and behind it was a ghost print of Zenith. But if you go to my Instagram page, you can see a lot of these stencils and me using them in various ways. So, and this one had that texture. I don't know if any of you saw my texture plate videos here on YouTube, but that's what's behind this one as well, as one of the texture plates. And this stencil is called Go-Go. That's the tentacle again. And this one was before I sent it to the designer. I had done these. The one that's similar to this one at Joggles is called Peppa. It has another hole in here, so it would show a print inside the leaf pattern as well for the one that they have. And this is Sage. These big flowers here are called Gretel or Greta, I think. Anyway, some fun things to do. Oh, here's a Peppa with the interior leaf print. I'm going to use this for the cover. All right, so this is part 2 of my cardboard book. I showed you how to apply these, leaving your book open when you applied the pieces of paper, and then showed you how I sanded off the edges and cut off the edges. And now I'm just going to show you how to do the cover. Again, I would do the cover last. So I am going to show you today something I discovered while doing this that I had fun with. I've been printing a lot on deli paper. That's what this is here. It's a thinner paper, and yes, if I put it straight down on here, we're going to see some of this wording behind. So I'm going to put the craft paper down just to cover that, and then I'm going to apply this on top of that. But what I discovered in doing that, this is one where I did that. This is deli paper on top of craft. The feel of it feels really good. I know that sounds weird, but it almost feels like a leathery type of cover. So obviously you can't feel this through the video, but it does leave a really nice finish. This is another deli paper on top of craft, and then I cut out, this stencil here was called Oxygen, and then I had doodled on top of that. Again, Go-Go in here. This is Greta again. Trying to see if there's any more of my new stencils in here. These are from Sage. This one's from Sage. This is another one I had done that we did not reproduce, but oh, and this one here is Paddles. So, okay. So here we go. I'm just gonna glue just the paper down first, doing it almost the same way, just we're only taking it to the edge. Okay, so watch me do that. Again, the Modge Podge for this. When we go to glue down the deli paper, we're going to have to use a thinner medium, because sometimes this matte medium is a little too thick for delicate papers. You don't really want to use the matte medium for that. And I'm hearing it's leaf blowing time in our neighborhood, so I apologize if you're hearing noise from outside. This is relatively simple to do. Again, we're just going to use a brayer to get out any air bubbles, or you can use a card. Still have my card here just to make it smooth. And I'm going to turn it over and get rid of any of the excess glue. that side. And I'll go ahead and do the other side. Now again, there is a little bit of a line on the back side from where we cut away the trip. So there's a bump there, a ridge. I am going to just put this right up to that ridge. And then when we go to put the binding on, I'm just going to line it up with that edge. It just is a cleaner line that way, only because if not, you'll have a bump in the paper. You don't have to do it this way. You could go all the way to the edge. You know what? Maybe I will do that. We'll just go all the way to the edge. It'll be fine. There's a couple ways of doing this. You don't, as far as when we get to the binding part on the edge there, to cover the binding rather, you could use gaffer's tape if you wanted to. Or sometimes I've even used that brown packaging tape. It just depends on how thick your book is of what you want to do, but you can also just use paper. Okay, so again, just doing this. You'll see what I mean. Well, maybe you won't be able to see it in the video, but there's a little bit of a ridge there. It's probably better that I did it this way. It'll make it smoother once I put the other stuff on it. The biggest thing is to make sure you get rid of all the air bubbles. All right. Just gonna open this up to look to see if there's any glue. Some of these edges inside the book I have not sanded yet. It's only because they aren't really completely dry yet. All right, so that's on there. Let that dry for a little bit, and I'm going to come back and cut that out. Okay, that seems to have dried enough. Again, I'm just going to cut that off using the bigger blade here, and I tend to just lean it real flat against the book while I'm cutting. This is a little trickier because there's two of them. I'm going to open this up. I think it'll make it easier. There we go. Sometimes you just got to get it started. The rest of the edges will just get off with the sandpaper. It's okay if it's not perfect. Again, be mindful where your other hand is so you're not cutting into your hand. Don't put your hand under here while you're cutting. Try to keep it out of the way. Okay, so that's off. And that seems pretty well attached. All right, I am just going to do the sandpaper on that edge a little bit. Okay, so that's done. Now I'm going to find the front, which is, this is the first page. I have these. Now these are a lighter tissue, so sometimes they can be tricky to glue down because they could easily tear. However, again, this is deli paper. It's not actual tissue paper. It has a little bit more strength to it. I will try to do a video soon on me printing on these papers. The only time they really rip when you're printing with them is if it's too much paint, and if it gets too wet, it sometimes causes a problem, but they tend to be pretty good. All right, so I'm trying to line this up so that I'm picturing this with these on the edge. I'm trying to make sure I am able to get them, and then I usually just kind of mark it, only because it's hard to see the edges once you put the glue down. This kind of helps me line it up. And when I say that, I'm just kind of creasing it where the edges are for when I lay it down. Okay, so I am going to use matte medium this time. This has a thinner consistency than the Modge Podge. It's easier to work with when you're working with the thinner paper, and it'll adhere just as well. If you use the thicker glue, it sometimes causes a little bit of a problem when you're trying to get everything smooth. Again, I should put a scrap piece underneath here so that we doesn't cause a problem inside the book if the glue goes over it. I'm seeing a little bubble from the paper underneath. It should be okay though. Okay. Again, I'm pretty generous with the matte medium. And I have my creases, so I kind of know I want to put it down. This adheres. It's not as easy to shift once it's down because of the paper, the type of paper we're using. Hence why I did the creases. Okay, so I got that one on and I got that one on. And now this feels a little bit more wrinkly than the regular paper. But again, if you use a brayer, it tends to take a lot of that out. And then you do have to be very careful if you're using a card. You can't really push as hard as you could on the paper. Just a little bit smoother and lighter pressure, or you could possibly rip the paper. It's pretty good though. All right, so I'm just going to turn that over and again look for the glue on the edges. You don't really see any, so I think we're good. But that's really going to have to dry. This paper tends to be a little bit wetter when you do this process. So it might take a little longer to dry than just the paper. But I'm going to put the one on the back. I'm going to try to match up the lines here. Let's see. So I had cut this in half. So if I line it up, it's going to just look continuous across. And to do that, just sort of line up this edge of this paper. It should match up pretty well. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's not going to be seamed together. Okay, and again, putting my edges in. Okay. So here we go. Not as close as to where I thought it was. Maybe off a little bit, but it's okay. It's the back. It's not like they're going to be seen together. And then again, here's a, and remember there's a little bit of that ridge in there, which again is fine. I'm just gonna let that go. Pull that out again. All right, I'm gonna let that dry and we'll come back and cut off the edges, and then I'm gonna use this scrap piece from the inside cover to put along the edge. Okay, we'll do that next. Okay, so I think I've let this dry long enough, and again, the way to tell if it's dry or not is when I touch it. If it feels really cold, that means there's still some wet glue in there. It feels a little bit cold still, but not damp. I don't know. You'll start to learn how that feels. Anyway, it's dry enough to go ahead and cut these off. So I'm going to do that. And again, I'm going to open the book to get them off. And again, be careful where your hands are when you're doing this. And you can see this side is starting to come undone. I'll have to put a little bit of glue down, but just be careful. Although the binding that I'm going to put on there will cover that anyway, but just be careful because this is a little bit more delicate paper than the craft paper. Okay, so that's done. And again, I'm going to take the sandpaper, just get all the edges off, especially on the binding end where we're going to put our cover there. Okay, that's good enough for right now. Make sure you have a clean surface too, though, because when you go to glue, you really don't want any of the dust or whatever getting stuck in your glue. All right, I'm just going to show you a couple of my examples first before we go ahead and do this. I had done a couple of these already, as I showed you in the previous video, but I'm realizing I bound these all a little differently. So this one I just use what's called gaffer's tape, and I didn't even put a gel print on the end there. And you can see that this gaffer's tape then just adheres straight to that binding. This is my roll of gaffer's tape. I think I got it at the hardware store. And it works really well, but it's just not real pretty. I mean, you could probably draw on it or paint it or whatever, but this is one of my books that I've done. This is one that we're going to do today. This is pretty simple. You don't have to buy the tape. We're going to glue these pieces down over the edges, and then when you open it, it kind of bubbles up a little bit. It does not adhere straight to it. And this was another one I did. I think I can't really tell, but I'm thinking I put the tape down and then glued the paper straight onto the tape, because that one does not bubble up at all. And I'm looking at it real closely, and there looks like there is a little layer of tape in there. So that's another way to do it. You know, you use that really secure glue on the gaffer's tape, and you know, you could just use some of your gel print instead of just plain paper on there. But this one's really thick, as you can see. So, and one other little trick that I have done is I've bought the packaging tape, and that has some glue on it. But again, you can just use paper and then just use the Modge Podge. But I at one point I was just printing on this tape with different gel prints, and then using it on the edges. But then you're limited to this size. You know, your edge of your book was always going to have to be within that size. So that's why I've kind of switched to just using paper. I can cut it to fit or have it a little bit bigger. So this is one that I have, and then I've already cut straight edge on both sides. You just want to make sure you're going to be able to adhere it. Come in a little bit on both sides of your book. It should be wide enough for that. This one's even wider. I tend to just look straight down and try to even it out on both sides. You could get a tape measure out or a ruler and measure it so it's perfect. I get bored with that. So I just kind of look at it, and then I pull it up and again crease it really well. And when I do that, you can almost see, does it look like it's even? And this is not even. It's a little bit, you know, on one side or the other, but that doesn't bother me that much. So I'm just going to crease it really good. And I don't need it this long. I'm going to mark where I want to cut it. And at this stage, I just go a little bit longer than where I marked it. I don't know if you can see my pencil mark there, but I go a little bit past that. So if I'm not perfect with it, I have room to shift. Oops, I'm on the wrong side of the book there. Okay, so what I'll do next, and that's kind of the way it's going to look when it's done. What I'll do next is mark it with a pencil on here, because I don't want to get glue on this edge. I think that'll cause a problem with this paper. So I like to mark where I'm going to put the glue. And again, if I fold it like that and just run the pencil along that edge, I'm going to know. I have a little line there that's hard to see, but I'll know where to stop the glue, just so I don't have an excess of glue. Turn it over on this side. Okay, so I'm going to now put the glue on, and then we'll adhere our edge of the book. And I'm just being mindful of that line that I put on there. I just don't want a ton of glue to come out onto my book, because again, I like to draw on these pages, and if there's glue on there, even though this is a matte finish, Modge Podge tends to not be as matte feeling to be able to draw on as I like. I really just like paint finishes. A matte paint finish is nice to draw on. All right. So I'm lining that up. And again, you'll see I went over just a little bit on the edges. Again, we can cut that excess off. It's better to be over a little than short. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter. I do have a couple where this one, I did not make it long enough. And so, you know, it's not the end of the world. Just... just pressing all that glue in there. And now I'm going to wipe off. Some of the glue has smushed out. Just going to wipe that off with a damp, I guess, paper towel. And that takes off any of that excess glue. I'm going to look inside. And I didn't use too much that it's coming out, but it will be okay on that edge. All right, so now I'm going to do it here. And again, it's important to have the inside done first, because if you do this part first, the book winds up being thicker in the end if you add a lot more inside, and then your binding is, and just learn from my mistakes because I have done it wrong. It ruins your binding. Your binding winds up being too big and then it rips right off. I've had to scratch things before and just start over. Okay, so again, I'm going to take my damp paper towel, just wipe it in there. Use my key card, and you can use the roller. All right, and I'm just going to let that dry. And then we'll go back in and cut off these edges. Okay, so I think I've let this dry long enough. I'm just going to cut off that excess paper at the bottom. And that is done. Okay, so I just got done editing the videos on how I made this book, and I have decided to raffle off the book. There will be a link in the description for you to sign up for the raffle, and I'm going to draw the raffle on Friday, December 22nd, 2023. Okay, so good luck. Thanks for watching.